Here's a question. What is the purpose of education? Is it to help young people get a good job? Is it to prepare them for university? Is it to teach them how to think? Or is education simply becoming a way of collecting qualifications? And here's a more difficult question. If someone gets excellent grades at school, but leaves school unable to manage their money, or communicate effectively, or solve everyday problems, have they actually received a good education? This is exactly the kinds of questions that can appear in IELTS. And today we're going to look at how to talk about education without sounding like you're reading from a textbook. Imagine you're in an IELTS speaking test. The examiner asks, what do you think is the main purpose of education? You could say, I think education is important because it helps people get good jobs. That's perfectly understandable. There's nothing grammatically wrong with it, but it's quite a basic answer. Now listen to this. I would argue that one of the main purposes of education is to equip people with the knowledge and skills they need to participate effectively in society and ultimately to build a successful career. Now, that's a very different answer. Notice what changed. We didn't simply use complicated vocabulary, we developed the idea. Education is important became education equips people with knowledge and skills. And then we added participate effectively in society and build a successful career. That's one of the secrets of a strong IELTS answer. Don't just give an opinion, develop it. Now, let's consider a debate. Should schools concentrate mainly on academic knowledge, or should they teach practical skills? For example, should students learn more mathematics? Or should they learn how to manage personal finances? Should they study literature? Or should they learn how to communicate effectively? Should they memorize historical facts? Or should they learn how to analyze information? There isn't necessarily one correct answer, excuse me. And that's important in IELTS. You don't need to have the right opinion. You need to be able to justify your opinion clearly. For example, although academic knowledge is undoubtedly important, I believe schools should also place greater emphasis on practical skills. That's already stronger. And now we can explain why. This is because students will eventually have to deal with issues such as managing their finances, communicating in the workplace, and making important decisions independently. Notice the structure: opinion, qualification, reason, examples. That's an extremely useful structure for IELTS. Here's another important point. Be careful with words like always, never, everyone, completely. These words make your argument very absolute. For example, schools should never give students homework. That's a difficult position to defend. What about younger students? What about language learners? What about revision before an exam? Instead, you can qualify your opinion. You could say, I don't think schools should necessarily give students large amounts of homework. Excuse me. Or, in my view, excessive homework can be counterproductive, particularly for younger students. That word is useful. Excessive. It means more than reasonable or necessary. And another excellent IELTS expression is to some extent. For example, I agree with this view to some extent, although I think there are some important exceptions. This allows you to disagree without completely rejecting the idea, and that makes your argument, well, much more sophisticated. Now, let's introduce another major IELTS topic: technology in education. Imagine a classroom 20 years ago. Books, pens, a blackboard, perhaps a computer in the corner. Now compare that with a modern classroom. Students can watch lectures online. They can access enormous amounts of information instantly. They can use artificial intelligence to explain difficult concepts. They can study from almost anywhere. This has obvious advantages, but there are also disadvantages. All, if information is available instantly, do students need to memorize facts? If an AI program can write an essay, what should students actually learn? And if students spend hours looking at screens, are they necessarily learning more effectively? A strong IELTS answer doesn't simply say technology is good, it says technology has undoubtedly made education more accessible. However, its impact on the quality of learning is rather more complicated. That little word there is doing a lot of work. However, it allows you to move from one side of an argument to another. Let's see if you can develop an answer. Here's the question. Some people believe schools should focus primarily on academic subjects, while others believe practical skills are equally important. Discuss both views and give your own opinion. Don't answer immediately. Think. Academic subjects. Why? Perhaps they develop knowledge and analytical thinking. Practical skills. Why? Perhaps they prepare students for everyday life and employment. Now, here's a useful structure. On the one hand, on the one hand, academic subject provides students with blah, blah, blah. Then, on the other hand, practical skills can help young people, blah, blah, blah. And finally, personally, or in my view, personally, I believe a balance between the two approaches is preferable. You don't need to memorize an entire essay. You need to have a structure for thinking. Let's quickly look at 5 expressions you've heard today. Equip someone with. Education equips students with valuable skills. Place emphasis on. Schools should place greater emphasis on practical skills. To some extent, I agree with this view. To some extent, excessive. Excessive homework can be counterproductive. And a balanced approach. I believe a balanced approach is preferable. These are useful because they're not just advanced vocabulary, they're chunks. And chunks are much easier to use naturally than trying to construct every sentence word by word. So, what is education actually for? To pass exams? To get qualifications? To get a job? To become a better thinker? Perhaps the best answer is that education has several purposes. It gives us knowledge, it develops skills, it teaches us how to analyze information, and ideally, it prepares us to function independently in the world. But here's the interesting question. If artificial intelligence can now provide information, explain almost any subject, and even write essays, what should schools actually be teaching? That's a much bigger question, and one we'll come back to, because in the next IELTS video, we're going to look at something that's completely transformed education, technology. And I'll ask you a rather uncomfortable question. If a computer can do your homework, what exactly are you learning? So, has technology made our lives better? Think about your day so far. You probably woke up because of technology. You checked your phone. You may have sent a message. You probably used the internet. Perhaps you worked on a computer and you may have paid for something using your card or your phone. And now you're watching this video using technology. Technology is everywhere. It's ubiquitous. But here's the really interesting question. Has technology actually made our lives better? Or has it simply created a new set of problems?